Welcome to the Speak by Design podcast, where we study personal style, message structure, and message strategy so you can become a consistently compelling force. Let's dig in. You have communication preferences, and you likely have very strong ones. You like Slack, you don't like Slack. You like Google Chat, Google Meets, Google Docs, or you don't like those. You like email, you like phone calls, you like Zoom, you like Teams. You also have pet peeves around the frequency of communications. You like getting emails at night, you don't like getting emails at night. You like emails on the weekend, you don't like emails on the weekend. You expect people to return an email within 4 hours of receiving it, or you know it will take 3 days to get a response and you are patient. These are unspoken often, these communication preferences, and you expect your team members to read your mind. I guarantee there is friction in your day because you have not spoken about your communication preferences with that person, that group, that team. So here's what I'm recommending is talk about your communication preferences at your next team meeting. And get in the habit of doing this periodically because people's preferences change. Maybe you thought that they liked receiving emails at a certain frequency, but now they see a better way of doing things. With an existing team where you're working with them over maybe an 18-month project, I would want to review this with them quarterly. Are we communicating effectively with one another? Are our meetings at the right frequency? Are we sending agendas and pre-reads in a favorable way that helps us make decisions? How could we make decisions more effectively? How could we analyze complex data more effectively together? How could we streamline our processes so it's easier to find information when we are looking for information? So communication preferences, when they are clear and decided as a group, it gets much easier to collaborate. It's even more fun to collaborate, and it's certainly simpler and more effective. So for you, imagine you have no communication preferences, because if you are the leader, as soon as you tell people that you prefer email, you will get so much more email. But if you keep this more open and say, I'm open to hearing what you all think is the best way for us to communicate, then you are more likely to learn from your team what is the best way. So for example, I prefer Google Chat with my direct team. If I've got a quick question, I don't want to write an email about it. I only use email when I know I need to document something for history purposes. If I want to cut through the noise of Slack and Google Chat and email, I go to text. And text means it's something really urgent from me. When it comes to something that needs more thoughtful planning, I'm always going to create a Google Doc. You might use OneNote or something similar to that to capture something that you're going to share with others and collaborate on. And I like the routine of a weekly meeting with my direct team and a quarterly meeting with the coaches and periodic meetings individually with people as needed. I like virtual meetings where we can see one another. I do not like phone calls unless we are both exercising and going for a walk. Then I do like a one-on-one phone call, but not a group call anymore. Don't you remember when that was the way we used to do teleconference with large groups of people, and there'd be long pauses and you didn't know who was going to speak next, and then people would speak and they'd talk over each other? Zoom and Teams and Google Meets have definitely improved communication for us because now we can read the body language. as long as people are on screen. Let me share some of the interesting pet peeves I've heard over the years around communication preferences. So, for one, I was working with a CEO who said his number one pet peeve was the way meetings were put on his schedule and the way they were titled. And that every time he saw something called check in call, he would get a feeling of dread because he said it usually meant somebody was going to get on Zoom or on the phone and tell him some bad news. And he said it's so much more exciting to have a creative title that describes exactly what the outcome is going to be of that meeting. And then in the notes of the meeting, for me to understand what questions are going to be discussed or asked of me. And I encourage you all to think about that when you send something that says update or check-in call, can you instead put the outcome in the title that you're hoping to achieve from that meeting? Another pet peeve was from a partner at a consulting firm who said he spent so much time traveling that he was forced to read all his email by phone. And other consultants on his team would send him these very lengthy emails, and it would take him forever to figure out what the question was, or there'd be so many questions he didn't know where to start in answering, and he was having to answer by phone uh, over his email. So what he would do if it was too long, he would hit reply, send a blank email back to them and say try again. And that would push the consultant to have to rewrite the note to make it concise enough that it would fit within the screen. Now, I know that sounds rather rough to receive a note from your leader that says try again, but the consultants all spoke about it as a way that taught them how to be more concise and clear in their communication, and they ended up appreciating the learning that came from that. Another pet peeve was from a senior leader who said that always he was receiving meeting materials 5 minutes prior to the actual meeting. So there was no chance for pre-read. And he was waiting for those materials, but because they came so close to the meeting, he was always coming into meetings cold, and therefore it would require more meetings for him to come up to speed to make a decision. And the workaround for him was he wanted to receive the meeting materials on a Friday so that he had the weekend to sit at home and read over the analysis and come in for a meeting on Monday or Tuesday and be thoroughly prepared to make a decision based off of the analysis in those meeting materials. And that's what's important to discuss with people is, do they like to have something to react to over the weekend? Is that when they like to review dense, complicated information versus more in conversation form in a real-time face-to-face meeting? Another person was very particular with me about preferring the phone over Zoom, that Zoom was exhausting them and they preferred to have the freedom to just be on the phone. It kept the conversation shorter for them. Now, my experience is different. I really like to see the person. I feel like I'm right there with them. I've got a really good setup in my home office that makes me feel like I am face to face with people. But this particular person preferred the phone. And I did find that when we spoke on the phone, we got more accomplished because I was adapting to his preference. And then another pet peeve was a person who said, I don't want a conversation. I want to come into a meeting and I want to be briefed. So this senior leader loved the briefing style where somebody comes in and would educate him on a solution, and then he could have time to think about whether or not he wanted to move forward. He did not want the dialogue. Now, in my situation, I do not like that. I don't want to come in and lecture. And that's true for when I'm training as well as when I'm I'm selling something. I want that interaction because that's the only way I'm getting feedback to understand if I've customized the solution enough. So there might be a compromise there. I might have to, if this is my audience and my audience prefers that briefing, maybe I begin with some briefing, or that's the pre-call is a briefing. And then I say, when we get together, we're going to have a conversation. Or I require the conversation up front and the briefing will happen later. But it feels like that one is unfair to me, the person briefing, if I don't understand what my audience needs and wants, what they care about, what their pre-existing opinions are. I really need to know them better to serve them better. And that requires an upfront conversation, usually, or a survey or some way of getting some information from them in advance. Another person preferred to present in spreadsheets versus PowerPoint. And the reason they liked the spreadsheet is they could focus on the data and the evidence and have more of an open dialogue about, are these numbers directionally correct and can we count on these, versus having all of those questions depicted in PowerPoint form. Because if you had it in PowerPoint form, no matter what, you would always be returning into the spreadsheet. So why not just present from the spreadsheet? But think of your audience. Not every audience likes to look at a spreadsheet, and you're moving through the spreadsheet. One person who's driving that, they have all the advantage because they know exactly where their eye is going. But the person watching you maneuver through a spreadsheet is getting dizzy from the experience. So usually if there's something that requires a spreadsheet, that is a better pre-read. And then when you come in, take a screenshot of just those elements and put them in PowerPoint so that you're not disorienting the audience while you're maneuvering through there. And that's if you're using a screen and this is a virtual meeting. If you're in person, paper prints are probably better for that type of meeting when you are going to be using a spreadsheet, and then maybe you highlight or expand the section that you want to focus on so people can read it. And then the other important thing to ask people is, how many meetings do you think we will need to make a decision? And I had a big lesson learned here when I worked in Amsterdam. I was working for a global bank out of Amsterdam, and they were a consensus building culture. And I kept believing that in every meeting we had made a decision. We had not made a decision. And then in the next meeting, I would think, oh, this is the one. This is the one where we will make the decision. And everyone would nod. Nobody would disagree, but no action would happen after the meeting because we were still building consensus. And I did not realize that. So it's important to ask people that you are working with for the first time about their communication preferences and how they like to meet, how they like to make decisions, how much time they need to make decisions, how this group, if they're a group that already know each other well and you're new to the group, how have they made decisions in the past? That's going to inform you so much better than you believing you can teach them how to make decisions in the way you make decisions, especially if you're the only new person to the group. And the other question to ask is around the agenda, because if you set an agenda, some groups will believe that you follow that agenda at all cost. You do not jump to other items in the agenda. You go in order of events through the agenda, and whatever you don't get to, you save for next time. Other groups would say, oh, we might release the entire agenda. Maybe we don't cover any of that because something else has emerged as a greater priority. It's good to ask your group how they feel about agendas. Are they rigid? You can also ask about their feelings about starting on time versus starting 5 minutes after the hour or 10 minutes later. You can ask them about the length of the meeting. Do we believe these meetings need to be an hour? Could they be 45 minutes? Should they be 90 minutes? At what length do we think it's too long? And then you can get into the frequency of the meetings as well. grab a notepad and I am going to go through a list of questions for you to consider asking your leader or your new team about what they prefer as it relates to communication. So the first question is, how involved do you all need to be in problem solving? Does everybody need to be involved? Does the leader need to be involved only at the end, just a little bit, or fully? Question number 2, how much information do people need and want? Do they want to see all the analysis, every little detail, or do they want a one-page summary? Do they want a PowerPoint deck? Do they want a conversation with a headline answer in the next meeting? And then what is the right frequency for you all to be talking? Is it checking in and out every single day? Do you want a morning check-in note and a morning checkout note, or a chat over Slack or Google Meets letting people know that you're in and out of the office? Do you want a daily update on what has been completed, a weekly update? Is it on Fridays? Is every other week a good enough frequency for updates? Maybe for your skip level leader, a monthly frequency is good, or every other. And what is their preferred way to communicate with you? Do they like Zoom? Do they like Teams? And I would get very specific on the technology. Some people are very passionate about their Teams and they do not want to use the Zoom. And when it comes to face, like I said, I have that person who prefers a phone call. They don't want to get on video and they don't require in person at all. But some people are going to say, it would be great if you could come to town and visit. Or you're going to have people who say, I expect you in the office every day. So that's very important to get discussed. And how do they like to work in meetings? Do they actually want to work through details, through a presentation, through some handouts, printed handouts? Do they need those handouts a day in advance? Do they want a conversation without documents? And then when it comes to very complicated information, do they want that in a memo form, a presentation form, a spreadsheet form? Or does it even matter? Maybe they don't have a preference when it comes to that. And then when do they want to read those materials? Is it a day before the meeting? Or is it fine during the meeting? Or do they want it sent to them after the meeting, where they want you to give the color commentary, tell them what to look at, and then you'll get into it after the meeting? Or do they need that weekend time where they can sit on the couch and read the materials slowly and digest it? And then ask them about how much time they need to make decisions and how they make decisions. And the time is really interesting. That's what I wished I had known when I worked overseas, is that it was going to be months. They needed months to make big decisions. And then ask how they feel about time, about punctuality, about, if this is a 30-minute meeting and we need more time, should we schedule more time later that week? Could we just extend for the full hour? Can we leave a cushion after that meeting so that if we need more time and we need the full hour, we can take it? How do they feel about the agendas, that you can't release them? You have to stick to the agenda at all cost. And then a nice open-ended question about, what other things do you value when it comes to meetings, presentations, and conversations? What are your favorite technologies? Do you like receiving text messages? And I do think that text messaging is the best and most effective way of getting people's attention. And maybe that's through the notes feature in an Apple iPhone, or it's through WhatsApp. But find out what they want and then adapt as best you can on things that you're very passionate about. Explain why you prefer something differently and why you think it's worth them experimenting with. You do not have to always abandon your preferences in the service of others. Sometimes we can increase our influence just by understanding communication preferences. Well, I hope this gives you many ideas for how to remove that unnecessary friction. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. If you are enjoying all of these lessons, but now you're hungering to turn all of this into skills and habits that make this work intuitive and natural so that you don't have to think about it, then you want to join Speak by Design University. That's our coaching program that gives you private coaching, group coaching with me, group training, self-paced learning, as well as exceptional networking with other people like you. This program is for managers and above, people whose careers are on fire and they're looking to hit their next level, and they want to do that sooner rather than later. Check it out at speakbydesign.com/join. That's speakbydesign.com/join, and you can start with us at the 1st of next month. We hope to see you there.